You don't snap because the cereal spilled, you snap because nothing in you stayed unspilled. That sharp voice at 7:14 a.m. was building long before breakfast hit the floor. Most parents know the moment instantly and hate themselves almost as quickly afterward. The slammed drawer, the repeated question, the missing shoe, the tiny sound that suddenly feels enormous. You hear your own reaction and wonder why something so small felt unbearable. Because the trigger is small, but your nervous system is already carrying too much weight. Parents are often told patience is a choice, as if strain politely waits permission. But patience is harder to access when your body thinks everything needs handling immediately. That changes the question from what's wrong with me to what am I holding? And that question matters because overload hides itself best inside ordinary family moments. It hides in the lunch you forgot, the email you still haven't answered. It hides in the teen upstairs replying with one-word texts after scrolling until midnight. It hides in never finishing one thought before another need starts pulling. Snapping is often what stress looks like when it has run out of polite disguises. And that does not mean you're cruel, broken, or secretly becoming your worst parent. It usually means your brain has shifted from thoughtful mode into emergency efficiency. In that state, every extra sound feels bigger and every request feels badly timed. You still love your child, but your bandwidth shrinks until normal life starts scraping. That scraping feeling is where guilt enters and makes everything heavier than before. Because now you are managing the mess, your reaction, and the shame about reacting. Modern parenting makes this worse by turning ordinary pressure into a constant performance review. You were supposed to stay calm, stay present, stay grateful, stay regulated, stay available. While answering work messages, remembering appointments, monitoring screens, buying groceries, and keeping everyone's emotions from spilling. No wonder tiny things become final straws. Your day is made of straws. And some of those straws are invisible, which makes parents question their own reality. Invisible work drains differently because nobody interrupts to say they noticed it happening. You carry the emotional calendar, the social map, the medical details, the household temperature. You remember who needs socks, who needs encouragement, who needs consequences, who needs softer words. You notice the mood shift before dinner, the silence after school, the dread before Monday. So when your child asks one more question during that full internal traffic jam, it lands on a system already blinking red, not on some calm open meadow. That is why parents can sound harsher than they intended over unbelievably ordinary moments. The socks were never only socks, and the dishes were never only dishes. They were the sound of one more demand hitting a completely saturated mind. Sometimes the snapping starts before the child even speaks, which scares parents most. Because then it feels less like stress and more like you've changed. But often what changed isn't your character, it's your recovery time disappearing. Years ago, pressure came in waves, and sometimes there was space between them. Now it stacks without ending: notifications, prices, school forms, news alerts, sibling conflict, sleep debt. Parents are not only raising children, they are buffering children from a restless world. And buffering takes energy even when nobody sees the cost on your face. You absorb the bad grade, the friendship drama, the frightening headline, the screen time battle. Then someone spills juice and suddenly your body acts like it heard a siren. That overreaction makes more sense when you realize your system stops separating levels of threat. A spill is not dangerous, but overload makes inconvenience feel strangely urgent. A repeated question is not disrespect, but exhaustion hears it as pressure. A teenager's shrug is not always rejection, but a depleted parent feels dismissed. This is why snapping is so confusing. The moment and the reaction rarely match. The outside event is tiny, but the inside backlog is huge already. Parents often miss this because they only judge themselves by the final tone. They don't count the 100 small frictions that quietly narrowed their emotional margin. They don't count the sleep debt that makes every feeling arrive louder. They don't count the guilt of working late or not working enough. They don't count the constant screen negotiations that turn evenings into low-level combat. They don't count the emotional whiplash of parenting children living partly online. One minute your child is beside you, the next they're somewhere unreachable behind glass. Especially with teens, snapping sometimes carries grief that doesn't look like grief. You miss the easy access you once had to their daily thoughts. You miss being needed without resistance, and you resent missing it sometimes. Then they answer with attitude, or silence, or a blank stare at dinner. And the intensity in your response shocks even you because it seems too personal. Sometimes it is personal, just not in the way guilt assumes afterward. It touches the fear that you're losing connection while still carrying full responsibility. That combination can make a simple interaction feel loaded before words are even spoken. Parents are asked to be endlessly patient during years that are emotionally provocative. Children are supposed to develop through mess, repetition, defiance, slowness, and unfinished regulation. But adults are expected to absorb that beautifully while suppressing their own limits. That is an impossible standard wearing the costume of normal family life. And impossible standards always create private shame because nobody can actually live inside them. So parents start interpreting overload as moral failure instead of nervous system reality. They say, "I should be better at this," when what they mean is tired. They say, "I'm too sensitive," when their body has not exhaled all day. They say, "My child shouldn't trigger me," while carrying months of accumulated strain. The language becomes self-attack, even when the real issue is depletion underneath. And self-attack rarely restores patience. It usually consumes the last remaining energy. This is why guilt can quietly make snapping happen more often, not less. Guilt keeps the body tense, watchful, self-critical, and mentally crowded for hours afterward. So the next inconvenience arrives in a house already emotionally full again. Real repair begins when parents stop arguing with the fact that pressure changes behavior. Not excusing everything, but understanding enough to interrupt the pattern earlier next time. Earlier might mean noticing your jaw clench before your voice rises sharply. It might mean recognizing that everyone's talking, but your system only hears demand. It might mean admitting you are not angry about this exact thing. You are angry about the pileup, and this was simply where it surfaced. That distinction sounds small, but it changes the way parents respond next. Because if the problem is only the child, you stay in battle mode. If the problem is overload, you can start protecting capacity instead of only demanding behavior. Sometimes that protection is embarrassingly small and still completely necessary in real life. 2 quiet minutes in the bathroom before answering another question can change tone. Saying, "Give me a second," is not failure, it is emotional steering. Lowering one demand on hard nights can prevent 5 unnecessary collisions later. Choosing cereal for dinner once is often wiser than forcing a perfect evening. Letting a chore stay unfinished may protect connection better than pushing through resentment. These are not lazy choices, they are decisions made with nervous system honesty. Parents need that honesty because burnout loves homes that still look functional. Burnout does not always look like collapse, often it looks like constant irritability. It looks like resenting small interruptions, then feeling awful for resenting them. It looks like doom scrolling beside a sleeping child because your mind cannot land. It looks like wanting everyone quiet, then feeling lonely when the house finally stills. It looks like being touched out, talked out, decisioned out, and visibly fine. That last part matters because parents often dismiss distress unless it looks dramatic. But quiet suffering is still suffering even when dinner got made somehow. Even when the laundry is folded, the calendar synced, the lunch is packed. Even when the family photo looks warm and no one else suspects anything. Many parents are functioning far above their emotional fuel level for months. That is why the smallest thing can suddenly receive the energy of everything. And children feel that intensity even when they do not understand its source. Younger kids often think they caused the whole storm by needing something simple. Teens may act indifferent, but many absorb the household temperature very deeply. They notice the exhale, the clipped answer, the way you answer without looking up. Some become quieter, some sharper, some more glued to screens, some more avoidant. Not because they are shallow, but because stress changes the whole family language. That is why repair matters more than perfection, especially after a snapped moment. Repair does not need a speech, it needs honesty small enough to trust. "I was overloaded, and I sounded harsh" is powerful because it names reality. It teaches children that love can stay present even when behavior needs mending. It also teaches parents something crucial. One bad moment is not the whole story. A snapped moment is information, not a final verdict on your character. It is a flare from a system asking for less pressure, more support. And support is not always grand, often it starts with accurate naming. Saying "I'm overwhelmed" is more useful than saying "I'm failing at motherhood." Saying that you need recovery is more honest than calling yourself impatient and difficult. Saying "this week is too much" can loosen shame before it hardens. Parents deserve language that explains their experience without turning them into villains. Because when your language becomes kinder, your next choices often become clearer too. You may notice the argument started earlier when your work message arrived during bedtime. You may realize the screen fight carried fear about your child, not just annoyance. You may see that the mess hurt because it confirmed how little margin remained. That kind of clarity does not erase stress, but it reduces self-betrayal. And parents who feel less ashamed can recover faster, repair sooner, and ask earlier. Not because they became superhuman, but because they stopped treating strain like a secret. The real danger is not needing help, it's believing your love should need none. Love does not cancel overload, and overload does not cancel love either. Both can exist in the same kitchen during the same exhausting Tuesday. You can adore your child and still feel activated by their ordinary needs. You can be grateful for your family and still crave silence so deeply. You can mean well, lose it, repair, learn, and remain a good parent. Sometimes good parenting sounds less like constant calm and more like honest return. Return to yourself after the rush, and return to your child with truth. Return to the fact that pressure shaped the moment, not the whole relationship. Because children do not need flawless parents nearly as much as real ones. Parents who understand their own overload often respond with more wisdom, not less. They become less shocked by their reactions, which makes them less ruled by them. They start building tiny pauses before eruptions instead of apologizing after every fire. They stop measuring love by endless patience and start measuring awareness too. And awareness is what turns a shame spiral into a turning point. So if you've been snapping over small things, look underneath the thing. Ask what else arrived with it: noise, worry, guilt, pressure, grief, unfinished thoughts. Ask what your body had already been carrying before that exact moment. Ask what would have helped 5 minutes earlier, not just what failed. That question is gentler, smarter, and far more useful than punishing yourself again. Because parents do not heal through humiliation, they heal through truthful attention. And truthful attention says this was a signal, not a sentence about you. If this hit something real for you, you're not alone here today. Share in the comments what small thing feels strangely huge lately at home. And if you want more honest conversations about what parenting stress really means, subscribe. The next video goes deeper into why exhausted parents can feel numb, not just angry.